Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Security Repo podcast. Today, we are here by J Wolfgang Goerlich, who is an advisory CISO, mentor, and strategist. And today, we're going to be diving into a couple of interesting topics. We're going to be talking about some security design frameworks, but we're also going to be talking about how to build and maintain relationships in cyber, which is a really important topic and one that I think is often overlooked. So, Wolfgang, thanks so much for being here and taking the time to chat to us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Especially thanks for having me on to discuss some of my favorite topics.
Well, that's what we're all about here, is people being passionate. Well, it's great to see you again. We met back at B-Sides 312 here in Chicago, which was an awesome conference. One of the best B-Sides I've been to, really. I loved it. But we were talking at the after party, and you brought up this idea that you're working on, well, not more than an idea, a security design framework. And let's just start very high level. Let's boil that up 10,000 foot view. What do you mean by security design framework?
One of the things that I've been focusing in on is being more intentional with our controls. We've long had, I'll say design patterns like defense in depth. Okay, great. We'll just keep adding things. All right, I'm sure that'll be fine. We've had design patterns like let's follow maturity model or let's follow a control framework. Okay, fine. We've argued long in the industry about compliance versus security, and this is not the time or place to rehash that argument. But one of the things I've noticed is, be it at the security program level, right, for a workforce, be it at the product level at a startup or a tech company, very rarely do we really apply good design principles. Like what makes a toaster a great toaster? What makes a phone a great phone? What makes a computer a great computer? What makes any of our apps that we love and enjoy great apps is typically great design. And if you contrast that, if you talk to anybody but a hacker, right, anyone but one of us in the know who loves our little settings and configurations, and say, hey, how do you feel about this product you absolutely love versus the steps you have to take in your organization to upload a document or to start a meeting or to do anything. What compare and contrast those two experiences for me. Very rarely would I argue, will you have someone go, oh, I just love the security team at work. They're fantastic.
Somebody's got to love them. We're keeping people safe out there in the world. But yeah, definitely in the era where it's become known as the Department of No.
I'm curious here with the frameworks and everything. Why do you think that this has become such a polarizing kind of topic? Why is the security team kind of viewed this way at the moment?
Well, there's a number of reasons. First off, vendors don't help us, right? Very few products do have good designs. Very few products in general have product design teams. So one of the things that I oftentimes ask of any vendor I'm looking for is, how many product designers do you have? Right? Do you have a chief of design? So right off the bat, the tools we're working with are not necessarily friendly for your average employee. And secondly, the reality is we're always scrambling, right? We're always short for budget. We're always short for time. There's always 3 fires and an incident that we're juggling at any given time. And so the ability to step back, think strategically, and really design a program is sometimes seen as a luxury. Like when I do coaching of CISOs, they'll oftentimes say to me, "Oh yeah, that sounds great. If only I had that luxury. If only I had a month to do that. If only, right?" Because it is very hard to get out of the mode that we've been in for 20 years, which is one of firefighting.
Yeah.
So let's roll it back to the security design framework here. Like, what are specifically you suggesting? Like, what are the actions someone needs to take, or the path that you think people need to be on?
Yeah, for one, I think it's important if you have a enterprise architecture team that you partner with them as opposed to going off and creating your own. So like TOGAF and those types of architecture principles are good ones to follow. For another, I think it starts with envisioning the path that our typical person is going to take, right? The golden path, the everything is fine and a person's just doing their job path. Doing that analysis and then also doing the analysis of the adversarial path. Now we can talk about that in terms of attack path or threat model or adversarial journey. There's a lot of different ways we slice and dice it. But if we can look at how does a user get to the resources they need and do their job, and how would a criminal get to those same resources? A couple interesting things come out of that. First off, there's a lot of different ways, meaningful ways, that we can reduce friction or we can increase the experience. And by the way, getting rid of friction altogether, we can talk about that. I gave an entire lecture on that at a recent conference. Isn't always a good thing, right? But making a less friction-filled experience and creating more desire to complete tasks, we can do a lot of things just to increase the user workflow just by looking at it and asking what of this really matters. That's step one. Step two is it's very readily apparent when you map both of these out that there's a number of controls you can put in the way of a criminal that a user doesn't even see. And because we're oftentimes operating at a checklist response or at the demand of an auditor or at requirement from a partner or at a recommendation from a vendor, we tend to just throw all this stuff on there and not really think through, what is this doing? Is this on the adversarial path? Does this add more friction to the user than it's worth? Are we creating enemies? Right? There's a lot of different ways we can make for better experience, starting with those two things. What are the paths that they're taking? What are the choices they're making for both criminals and our workforce? And of course, we can do this for customers. And how can we optimize those paths and choices?
So I'm curious if you can give me a couple examples, or at least one example of something that you put in the adversary's path that doesn't affect the customer, because I think of anything we do is going to affect the UI, the UX in some way, shape, or form. So just what does that actually look like on the ground?
So I just got done giving a workshop, a 2-day workshop on multi-factor attack and defend. It was just something I wanted to build, something I wanted to play with. An organization liked it, and they had me give it a couple times. It was a great deal of fun. And on day 2, we introduced Evil Jinx. Have you guys played with Evil Jinx, the proxy attack?
Officially, no.
Okay, so basically what you do is the user logs into this proxy and they think it's the right site, right? They put in their username and the password. The proxy proxies that authentication to the real site. The real site does multi-factor. And so you're expecting a multi-factor. I just logged in. So you complete the multi-factor, you give in the code, and then the proxy is able to steal the session token. So most modern multi-factor is susceptible to this. Here is one example to answer your question. Why not just do a device check? Like device ownership, be it assert, be it domain joined, be it whatever, just that simple check. The proxy might get that information, but the actual resulting service that we're attacking sees the proxy, not your device, breaks Evil Jinx. User doesn't have to do anything. They don't even know. They don't even care, right? I don't know what certs are in my box, and most users don't even know what domain join means, nor should they. So that's one example of what I'm talking about, something on the path of a adversary that's not in the path of a user.
Thanks.
Right. I want to switch up the conversation now because I'm really curious to get into some of this. You work at the CISO level or CISO level, however you want to talk about it. Part of dealing in that environment and working with that is about kind of relationship building, and I guess what was the path that you went in to kind of develop those relationships, to build it, to kind of get to this level, to gain trust, to move through the ranks? Was it all technical? Was it all relationships? And how did that all kind of come about?
Certainly. So to get to my current position, to be effective, can you give me a little more scoping?
Yeah, let's start off kind of the role to kind of get to the CISO level. We have a lot of people and feedback that listen to this podcast that are looking at moving up through the ranks of security, that are interested in being able to kind of effectively get to the top level. We'll talk about kind of perhaps the skills and how to be effective in that maybe later, but let's start talking about your path of how you kind of got to the, let's call it the top level of security. Does that make more sense?
Sure, absolutely. And, first I would say if you think you want to be a CISO, you probably want to really think if you want to be a CISO or CISO, or however we're putting the emphasis on it for our international folks. Because you do definitely give up a lot of joy and fun that happens at the technology level. Being an individual contributor, being an engineer, architect, so much fun. I've oftentimes said that no matter what level you're at, like people will say, hey, how do I do security? I'm like, well, where are you at in the org? Security starts where you're at and building around. Similar with relationships. If I am a systems engineer, am I building good relationships with the people who are submitting tickets to me? Do I sit down with them and say, hey, I noticed you sent a whole bunch of things the past couple months. What's driving that? What do you got going in your world? And, and by the way, not just work, but as you get to know them, like, who are you as a person? What do you care about? What are your values? Tell me about your kids. Tell me about where you like to vacation. You have a good restaurant recommendation for me. It starts with who you're collaborating with. It extends to, let's talk more big picture about what we're working on and collaborating on. And then it goes into, let's deepen the relationship beyond the professional into some of the personal domains. I think that would be a good 3-step. Now, what happens? I'm a systems engineer. Wait a minute, that's never going to help me because they're, a DevOps engineer. Well, okay, but every DevOps engineer wants to be the head of product. and the head of product works with the CISO. You'd be surprised. I like that you included mentor in my bio because a couple years ago, I was running a academy. We put 67 people through this apprenticeship program. Hired them in right out of college, first job, second job, third job, first real security job, and then let them go. And the thing I would say to every single cohort we hired was look to your left, look to your right. These are the people who you're going to be buying from, selling to, working with, hiring, or being hired by for the rest of your career. Build friends now. And some of them took that advice and some of them didn't. But what's fascinating is one of my previous mentees is now a deputy CISO. Another is now a director of GRC. And we're talking, 10 years into their careers at this point in time. But if you're like, hey, man, how would I ever know a director of GRC or a deputy CISO? Well, you would have made friends with them 10 years ago. And grew up relationships as they grew.
Makes a ton of sense. So now I'm curious, how did you go down that path? What's your CISO origin story?
Well, so it's a long story. I started off at a hospital system. I became known as the guy who knew about computers and was helping during a digital transformation. It wasn't my job. I was hired for another job. But we were doing a digital transformation at the time that meant taking typewriters away from nurses. So this was early days. The head of that program left. They hired me to run it, and I was writing code for the EMR. I was cabling the network. I was building the servers both physically and logically, deploying desktops, training the entire hospital on how to use it. Great time. Coming out of that, I did consulting and ended up VP of a consulting firm where I built a PMO and mentored and coached the folks. And one of our largest clients was a money management firm, which is now part of Vanguard. And got to know those guys. They needed some help. I went to work there and ended up being over the years responsible for their IT staff, their networking staff, their software development staff. I modernized them onto the cloud. I built their first DevOps team in financial services in the state. And just had a great run there. And it was, again, all just relationships I was building at the time and relationships within the organization and knowing what people want, right? Like oftentimes we have this idea, this sort of textbook example of here's how you manage risk. You assess it, you assign a dollar value, confirm the dollar value. No, you talk to the people who are scared about something. They're like, we need to fix it. And I'm like, I will save it. I once sold internally got budget for my GRC program, not based on risk, not based on concern, but because the CFO was playing golf with another CFO, and the other guy he was playing golf with was spending way too much money on his GRC program, and he wanted to brag about how he was able to do it with me and less money. Like, sure, I'll take $500,000 for that. We'll stroke your ego. That's fine. And so there needs to be a understanding about what other people want and what other people desire and how people actually work that works both in the relationship side and the design side that's too often missing. But at that time, so I'm building this program and I'm like, oh man, I don't have enough relationship with pen testers. I don't have enough relationship with red teams. I know what I'll do. I'll start a hacker collective. I had that in the 90s. I don't have it now. And so I started a Michigan security community, started a B-side, started another conference next to it, and grew that community to several hundred people with active CTFs and meetings and all this sort of stuff. And suddenly I was getting great intel about, hey, did you know you have this vulnerability? Did you know I could clone your badge? Did you know there's this going on? I'm like, wait a minute, what's going on? And so I got effectively like 3 years of free pen tests. Thankfully not time on target, but certainly, hey, here's what we would do if we were messing with you, which positioned me very well when Anonymous took a run at our firm, but that's a whole other story. And so now I'm in this position where the firm that I love and have transformed in financial services is getting acquired. And I didn't want to turn it off. I love the place. I didn't want to turn it off. So with all these relationships and with all my friendships, I went into consulting. And again, the people you hire from or the people you get hired by or the people you sell to or the people you buy from. Suddenly I've got a great consulting firm going that feeds into that apprenticeship I mentioned. I ended up running 4 practices, identity and data and strategic advisory and GRC, and just had a great run of it. So it's always been this idea of who do you like, who do you have fun with, and what fun work are we doing together, and how do you turn that into something meaningful for both you and for the organization you serve.
That's really interesting, and I love the origin story there. And what you're saying about relationships is so true. And you've focused a lot on I am relationships kind of around you and the people that are going to help you in your career and get budget and all of that. What about the relationships with the team members that are kind of on the grounds in the security reads? Is managing relationships with them in a similar vein, managing relationships with the internal teams? Is that kind of similar to how you approach managing relationships with the the directors that are 10 years into their career, and what the example you just gave?
It is, but it isn't. And first, let me say, I love the fact that you're picking up on that, because we did a multi-year study in my previous role with Scientia. And the first time we looked at, like, I don't know, business continuity, and we found that people who did good business continuity, like the people who said that their outcome on business continuity was top tier, were more than twice as likely to have good relationships with their peers, with their executive team, with their broader organization as measured by security culture, and with their directs as measured by retention. And then we did the same study and we looked at incident response, found the same thing. And then we found the same thing with endpoint detection response, and then with SASE. I think it was like 3 or 4 times in this where it finally dawned on me that it wasn't like, oh, if you do BCP really well, you'll have good relationships. It's like, no. Across just about every single program that we measured across 5,000 folks annually, double blind study across 4 years of this research, consistently, every single slice, if they were doing it great, they also reported great relationships. And those great relationships weren't only up, but also were down. And so you're spot on. I mean, no one wants to be in the trenches with someone they don't trust, right? You need to have a high degree of trust to do this job right, especially if we're talking about instant response, or especially if we're talking about taking chances with their careers and doing stretch goals or anything. So you do need to have really good relationships with your directs and with the people who report to them, with your staff all the way down the line. Now, I will say, of course, this is a different relationship, right? As a leader, you have to make some tough choices. We've all probably been in a position where we're like, why does that guy keep that other person around? They clearly don't know their job. They're just, good friends. That's not right. And likewise, we've all had people report to us going, man, I've got to let you go. And you're one of my favorite people. And this sucks.
Yeah.
So it is certainly a different relationship with different boundaries. But at the end of the day, we're all people, and we need to trust each other to be effective as a fighting team.
So you brought up, like, it's very important to start those relationships early in the career. And I gotta say, I am extremely grateful to the security community because I've only been in it a few years. That just every step of the way, someone's helped me, given me great advice, talking me off the ledge of like maybe security isn't for me a couple times out in the field. But for folks that um, are a little more established in their career, like what advice for them? Like, how do they go build these relationships? How do they go knock on the DevOps team's door, especially in the distributed world?
Yeah. So I want to touch on that, but can I not answer your question first?
Sure,
One
your
of the
time.
things I've been, well, it's your podcast. I want to make sure it's okay. One of the things that I've noticed, because I've worked in the DevOps teams, I went into the IT world. I was just on a call earlier today advising a gentleman who's running an executive community. Hands down, the hacker community understands this the best. I have not met another community. There's certain pockets of the dev world where I will say that we are neck and neck. But very broadly, of all the technical domains, I think the hacker community gets it the best. That it is always about, let me share what I know, let me share what I've learned, let me give you some advice, let me open the door for you, let me make an introduction for you. And oh, by the way, once you're in there, I want you to succeed because he's my friend too. And let me give you some good tips on how to win. Um, there is something really special about what we built in the hacker community. And I really hope as we go through layoffs like we're going through right now, and as we go through like spurts of hiring a whole bunch of college kids who just got into this for the money, I really hope and would encourage anyone who's listening to this, please, 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 let's hold on to this because it really is something special.
I agree with
Now,
you. That really echoes my experience. Like meeting Medusa from Cult of the Dead Cow, and she's just awesome. She's just gave me some great advice in the hallway at Hack Space Con, and just like, yeah, really awesome person.
she was one of the advisors of our Securing Sexuality conference last year, and was really influential in helping us get that off the ground too. Speaking of Medusa, small world.
Small world.
So your question though about relationships and how to knock on those doors, we're all really freaking busy. So one of the things I said earlier was start with who you're already collaborating with, because it's easier if you on the DevOps team, if they sent me 10 requests to do an architecture review on, let's say, it's easier for me to say, hey, can I set up a monthly meeting and just sort of like touch base and make sure that we're doing the right things, than to start cold. Now, if you are starting cold, I've done in my previous role, we had like 60,000 employees, so it was a long time trying to navigate that. And we would do all hands meetings. We would show up, get to know the people, give a brief spiel about ourselves, and open up some conversation that way. So you can do the road show, you can do the on demand, hey, here's what I'm seeing, let's let some time outside to build those relationships. And also, whenever there's an initiative that involves us, do you need some help with that? Right, that I've got a good friend who leads security in healthcare, and he built relationships with his HR team because he noticed his HR team was collecting a whole bunch of data they shouldn't, right? During hiring and onboarding, over email, over fax. He's like, what are you even doing right now? But rather than yell at them, he's like, hey, can I help you? What's going on? And they're like, oh, I really hope you can. This is terrible. I know it's terrible. It's inefficient. It's ineffective. No one likes it, but I can't get any budget for it. He's like, well, what if we were to collaborate and I'll come in on the risk side and you come in on the workflow side and the productivity side, and I'll help you get this across the finish line. He's been having great relationships with HR for years after that because he took some time to help someone else out.
Yeah, they're really going from the culture of no and the team of no to the team of empowerment, and like how do we get business done faster, better, and ultimately safer.
Right, absolutely. Everyone wants to do it faster, better, and we're always like, "Wait a minute, slow down and think." Back to design, by the way, the worst thing, and you hear this all the time, the worst thing you can say is, "I just want them to slow down and think." If you look at thinking fast and slow, if you look at this idea of system one, system two thinking, anytime we're having them slow down and think, we're creating a habit that will not last for very long. Anytime we're making it where they don't have to think, the secure thing is just what happens. It's just part of the process. It's just this is how we get work done. That's when we create a habit that will last. That's when we create a security culture of actual doing, not just being aware that something bad could happen.
Yeah, I really love that approach. And one hack, if you're wondering like how to build some great relationships with people from all around the world, start a podcast. It's a fantastic way to talk to people that are well above your wheelhouse. Which is, I say this as a joke, but it's literally one of the primary reasons why we started this. Is when we're meeting all these people, we're like, how do I get a chance to follow up on them in a meaningful way? Like everyone's busy, but have a podcast, bring them on here, and we get to chat to great people like you, and hopefully build some good relationships.
I used to do the Encode Decode podcast. And what I try to do is I try to get an executive, a director or a manager, and someone on the front lines. Every other podcast, I would try to get one of those three and try to. It wasn't always every other, but and then my whole thing was tell me your successes and tell me your secret. And I learned so much. I thought I was doing good, and then I was like, wow, there's like an entire another level of performance that I can get out of this.
Yeah. It was like when Dwayne started working at Good Guardian, I thought I was doing really good at conferences, and I think the year before Dwayne joined, I did like 20 conferences, and I was like, "Well, I've got to be up there." And then the year Dwayne joined, Dwayne did 37, and I almost killed myself trying to keep up with him. So I was like, like,
I
I think he
I
almost killed himself trying to do that too.
I love being in the community though. Like I say, it's
Yeah.
I'm an old Drupal head. I'm an old Drupal dev. I worked at Pantheon for years and got real deep into the Drupal community. Even got a shout out on stage one time from Dries. And that's the only community I can even come close to comparing security to. Like these PHP nerds who are just trying to build the best CMS, the safest CMS, and they're doing it together. And a whole community of like, how do we make the world safer? Sometimes it's by taking things apart, seeing how they work, and saying, "Hey, this is unsafe."
But that's what I was saying. Like there are still pockets in the software development world like that really still get good community. But then I also run across the people who are just like I just want to like collect my paycheck and write my code, and I don't want to like bother getting to know anyone. Just tell me what to write. And it
Yeah.
almost feels like the dev. I don't know if you guys agree with this or disagree with this, but for my separation of it, and I haven't run a dev team for about a decade now. It feels like those pockets are so precious, but it feels like there's been this encroachment of like I've got mine, just let me write my code and log off.
Yeah. It is interesting. Like it depends on it. I'm like in my experience of kind of having dev teams. I was a CTO of a company called Compago for 4 years, and you would have people that were just unbelievably passionate about technology, and it was great. And you'd have some people that just wanted to come in and code and log off. And I kind of liked having both because I couldn't imagine having a team of people that were all passionate, because sometimes it was so hard to rein them in because they would get so excited about well, one example was a guy who got so excited about building the greatest, most complex CI/CD pipelines you could ever imagine that just did everything. But also, we have a customer that's like dying to get a feature out, and you're like, "Okay, dude, breathe. I need you to do the feature." And then so having the two of them, I think that often works works quite well.
Well, that is a good point, right? It takes all kinds for sure to build a really good team. If you have a whole team of extroverts, you're not going to get anything done. If you got a whole team of introverts, you're not going to get the relationships. Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah. Well, we're coming to the end. We try and keep these all around 30 minutes, and we're going a little bit over. But we like to play a game with everyone that comes on called Best and Worst, and we ask them, "What's the best security advice that you would give someone?" And then, "What's the worst security advice that you've ever heard or received, or is out there?" Let's start with the best. What's the best security advice that you would give someone?
What type of someone?
I think
That's a good question.
that's a good
Anybody
question.
really, like
Anyone,
general.
like you can pick. You can if there's you can pick the audience. If you have something that'd be great for security people, for developers, for your mom and dad, you can pick the person.
So the best security advice I've gotten. Well, we're talking about developer. Let's talk about developer. The best security advice I've gotten is embed composition analysis, static, code analysis, code review in your process. Make it automated. Make it part of your tooling. Don't do all this manually, and ensure that you're putting out clean code, because it oftentimes only takes a couple lines of vulnerable code to topple over anything. And today
Yeah.
the tooling is just so good. So, embed the tooling into the life cycle. That would be my best advice.
Yeah, absolutely. We're all a big fan of tooling here, and it's the only way that when everyone talks about DevSecOps and shifting left, like the only way to practically do that is you're not going to turn every single developer into a security expert. You're not going to
Nor
be
should
able to
you.
get them to care about everything, but you can get them to use these tools and have the experts in the box. At least for as much as you can. It's not going to be everything, but as much as you can. I love that, because that is some good advice. And let's flip it on its head. What's the worst advice that you have ever heard, received, maybe even given someone?
Is
We've
this
got
is this a sponsored podcast?
yeah, we have our sponsor of Git Guardian.
Okay, but
That's what
not like a VPN sponsor.
No
No.
VPN.
We don't speak out. Just for the love of it.
I didn't want to do that to you, but my worst advice, and this is coming from all the podcasts. All the podcasts are like, run VPN because you don't want to be spied on. Blah blah. 100 or 99% of the world is TLS. You don't need a VPN. Also, a lot of these VPN providers, as we know, are taking advantage of that traffic for their own monitoring and their own use. You just moved in an amorphous. Someone might look at my free Wi-Fi over to someone else's network. And for what? I think the whole idea of you should run a VPN so that the hotel or airport Wi-Fi can't spy on you is just such terrible advice.
Yeah, we've had people talk about like the Wi-Fi and the hysteria around like not using public Wi-Fi before, and just if you're and how overhyped that can be for a lot of things. And I think the VPN companies are responsible for it, because you're right. It's every single podcast is on the VPN train at the at the moment.
One of the things I found really interesting, I know we're at time, but quick anecdote about design and human behavior is, for the longest time, everyone my age hated VPNs. I've done a lot of work in zero trust, and we're moving a lot of organizations away from VPNs. VPNless, or it's SASE, it's right on the edge, yada, yada, yada. One of the things we're seeing feedback from is the younger generation, the podcast listeners, people in their 20s and early 30s, who are like, but this isn't as secure. Why are we doing this? I need my VPN. And it's just because they've heard again and again and again how dangerous the world is without a VPN, that they're actually pushing back on something that's a better experience and offers better security.
Yeah.
I have the exact same feeling about HelloFresh and those pre-made meal delivery kits. It's like, just go to the grocery store. It's a third of the price, and you get a way better selection. Like,
Well,
yeah, I know.
This is so left field.
Yeah.
But on that, you get I get my groceries delivered now, and they have like a HelloFresh type things, and you click the meals that you want, but it doesn't like put them in a box. It just gives you the stuff that you need and a recipe, and it's kind of like, yeah, that is what HelloFresh is charging 4 times as much money to do. I never would have thought we'd be talking about HelloFresh on this podcast. This I love
Not
this.
sponsored.
It always
Not
always
sponsored.
Yeah. HelloFresh. Yeah, it's definitely not a sponsor. If someone's from HelloFresh is listening, I'll consider a sponsored segment. I will, but you probably don't want one now. Uh, all right. Now that we're well off topic, let's wrap it up here. Wolfgang, you do podcasts yourselves. You're active in the community. You're speaking at conferences. How can people follow you? Can you give a shout out to maybe places where you publish your content, podcasts that you're on, so that people can continue learning from you, and should they want to?
Sure. So I'm at J Goerlich at most of the socials, from LinkedIn to the everywhere else. jwgoerlich.com is my website. Our nonprofit, which helps apply cybersecurity to personal relationships, is Securing Sexuality, and runs Securing Sexuality. And that's a podcast and a conference. So you can find that at securingsexuality.com. And you mentioned B-Sides. Keep an eye out for B-Sides Detroit, which we're hoping to be bringing back later on this year.
Awesome. I'll be posting links to all of that in the show notes. So if you are listening and you're wondering, how do you spell Goerlich? There will be a link for it, so you don't need to worry about it.
Perfect.
I did want to ask as well, do you have, I'm assuming we can go to your website and see blog posts or diagrams or something of this secure design framework?
Yeah, I will. I've got a series of articles that lays out my principles that I'm sure we could put in the show notes as well.
Perfect. Well, one last time, thank you so much for being here. We've gone a little bit over, but you know what? It was such a great conversation. I had so much fun. So thanks for being here, and hopefully we can catch up in person sometime. Dwayne, any last words before I click the big red button?
Thanks so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom with us. Hope to see you again, maybe in Detroit.
My pleasure. Hope to see you there.